It started with a quiet night, the kind where the world feels paused, like time itself is holding its breath. She was alone, wandering through the abandoned fields beyond the city limits, when the sky suddenly split open. A light, bright and cold, slammed down around her, and everything familiar vanished in an instant. One moment she was standing on solid ground, and the next she was somewhere else entirely, surrounded by shapes that defied logic, beings that seemed both alive and impossibly alien. Her heart raced, but fear alone didn't prepare her for what was coming. These creatures weren't like anything humans had imagined. They moved with precision, their presence overwhelming, and every glance they gave her felt like it pierced through more than just skin. She couldn't speak, couldn't even cry out. It was as if the world she knew had been erased, leaving only the sensation of being watched, studied, and, most terrifyingly, tested. The air was thick, electric, and strange odors clung to her senses. Every second stretched longer than the last, each one a small eternity of suspense and terror. For 37 minutes, she endured things she could barely understand. Pain, confusion, and fear all blurred together, but something within her refused to break. Even as her strength waned and hope began to slip away, she felt a flicker of something deeper, something that whispered that this was not the end. The creatures seemed fascinated, almost curious, as if they were searching for something hidden inside her, something no one had seen before. Her mind raced, struggling to find meaning, to make sense of the impossible scenario she had been thrust into. And then, when everything seemed lost, it happened. Her eyes opened again, and she was back, but not quite the same. The world looked sharper, yet unfamiliar, and a strange warmth pulsed through her chest. Something inside her had changed, something that the aliens couldn't understand. The seconds that had felt like hours now seemed to hum with energy, and she realized that whatever they had done to her had awakened something new, something dangerous, something that could turn the tables entirely. Around her, the night was still and quiet again, but she could feel it watching, the knowledge that what had happened wasn't over. The sky above shimmered faintly, as if holding its own secrets, and she knew that the aliens weren't done yet. Whatever they had discovered, whatever they had forced her through, it wasn't just a test. It was the beginning of something far bigger, something that could change not only her fate, but the fate of every human alive. She took a shaky breath, trying to ground herself, but the shadows around her whispered that she was being hunted, even now. The fear hadn't left, but it mingled with a strange sense of power, power she didn't fully understand yet. And as she stepped forward, determined to survive, one question burned in her mind. How do you fight something that doesn't even follow the rules of life as you know it? Her steps were careful, almost hesitant, as if the ground itself might betray her. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of the city, even her own heartbeat. The memory of what had happened in that alien chamber clung to her mind like a shadow, impossible to shake. She couldn't explain what the creatures had wanted or why they had let her return. All she knew was that something inside her had changed, something that made the night feel alive in a way she had never experienced before. She tried to remember the days before it all began, but the memories felt distant, almost unreal. She recalled flashes, walking through crowded streets, sunlight bouncing off windows, the comforting weight of familiarity. And then the light came, and all of that vanished. The world she returned to was the same, yet she couldn't reconcile it with who she had become. Every reflection, every shadow, felt like it was watching her, judging her. She found herself drawn to a small, abandoned observatory on the edge of town, a place she used to visit as a child when she wanted to escape the noise. The building was dusty, filled with broken instruments and cracked glass, but something about it felt safe. Or maybe it was simply the only place where she could try to make sense of what had happened. She ran her fingers over the cold metal of the telescope, feeling the grooves etched by years of use, and wondered if the answers she sought were written in the stars. Even as she tried to steady herself, questions kept flooding her mind. Why had the aliens targeted her? Were they searching for something specific in humans? Or had she just been in the wrong place at the wrong time? And the strangest thought of all, what had they left behind inside her? There was a pulsing sensation under her skin, a rhythm that didn't match her heartbeat, something almost alive. It made her nervous, yet strangely powerful, as if she had been gifted with knowledge or strength she hadn't earned. She wasn't alone in feeling watched. Every time she blinked, she thought she saw a flicker in the corners of her vision, a shadow that disappeared when she turned her head. Was it real, or just her mind playing tricks after the trauma? Her instincts screamed that the aliens weren't finished, that their curiosity hadn't ended with her return. And if that was true, she knew she couldn't stay in one place for long. Every moment of hesitation might give them the chance to find her again, to resume whatever experiment they had started. As the wind howled through the broken windows of the observatory, she realized that survival wasn't just about escaping anymore. She had to understand what had been done to her, and fast. There was a part of her that longed for answers, for clarity, but another part, a quieter, darker part, knew that some truths might be too dangerous to face. And yet she couldn't stop. She had to move forward, even if it meant walking into the unknown, into a world where the rules of life and death had already been rewritten. Somewhere beyond the hills, the sky shimmered again. A faint hum reached her ears, low and unrelenting, as if calling her name. She froze, heart pounding, and realized she wasn't sure whether the sound was a warning or an invitation. The night held secrets, and she was the only one who had glimpsed them. But one question remained. Could she uncover the truth before it caught up to her again? The days that followed were a blur of careful movement and sleepless nights. She avoided crowded places, sticking to the outskirts of the city where no one could see her. Every time she caught a glimpse of herself in a window or a mirror, she barely recognized the person staring back. There was a sharpness in her eyes now, an intensity that hadn't been there before. She tried to ignore the pulsing sensation beneath her skin, but it was impossible. It felt like the aliens had left a part of themselves behind, a connection she couldn't fully understand, but that demanded attention. In her search for answers, she started noticing small things. Odd patterns in the night sky, unusual energy fluctuations around certain objects, strange whispers in abandoned streets. At first, she thought it was paranoia, but the evidence kept piling up. Others had felt it too, though none had survived long enough to speak. Rumors of disappearances and strange lights had circulated for years, dismissed as urban legends. Now she understood that those stories were fragments of a larger, terrifying truth. The aliens had been observing humanity for far longer than anyone realized. One night, while scavenging through a derelict library, she came across an old journal hidden in a forgotten corner. The handwriting was shaky but determined, describing experiences eerily similar to hers. Someone else had been taken, tortured, and returned, changed in ways that weren't visible at first glance. The journal hinted at a resistance, a small group of people who had begun tracking the aliens' movements, piecing together patterns that might give humans a fighting chance. Her heart raced. Could this be the first clue toward understanding her new abilities and the threat that still lingered? Even as she delved into the journal, she sensed another tension building, something inside her that didn't belong to her entirely. At times, it whispered ideas she would never have thought on her own, visions of places she had never visited, knowledge of things she could not explain. It was disorienting, frightening, yet oddly compelling. She began to wonder if the aliens' experiment had done more than test her. It had changed the very way she perceived the world. And if that was true, could she control it or would it control her? The nights grew colder, and with them came signs that the aliens were aware she was awake, aware she was learning. Lights flickered in empty streets, shadows moved without source, and faint hums echoed from the skies above. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was being hunted, and every moment of hesitation could give them the chance to reclaim what they had started. Even her dreams were invaded by flashes of their presence, abstract visions of impossible landscapes, and the haunting sense that they were always one step ahead. Her isolation weighed heavily on her. She longed for connection, for someone to share the burden of what she knew, yet she feared exposing anyone to the danger that now followed her. And still, she pressed on, driven by a stubborn, human need to fight back, to uncover the truth. Somewhere deep down, she realized that survival alone wasn't enough. Understanding, control, and maybe even revenge had become essential. But the closer she got to answers, the more she understood that every revelation came with a cost, and that the aliens' curiosity was far from satisfied. As dawn broke over the horizon, she paused on a hill, looking at the city beneath her. The world was waking up, unaware of the invisible war that had begun. She clenched her fists, feeling the pulsing energy beneath her skin, and whispered to herself. The next move would be hers, but she couldn't shake the fear that whatever came next might change her completely or end her before she even had a chance. The city beneath her seemed calm, but she knew better. Every shadow, every flicker of light could hide a presence that had watched her since the moment she returned. Her steps were silent as she moved through the streets, keeping to the dark alleys and abandoned buildings, following the patterns she had been mapping in her mind for days. Each night, the pulsing energy inside her grew stronger, almost unbearable at times, and she struggled to keep it under control. It was as if whatever the aliens had left behind wasn't just power. It was a warning. The journal had led her to a forgotten communications tower on the outskirts of town. Its steel skeleton rose like a skeleton of some long-dead giant, and she felt a strange familiarity as she climbed it, her hands gripping cold metal. From here, she could see the sky stretching endlessly, the stars like tiny, watchful eyes. She remembered the flashes of light, the strange vibrations that had haunted her sleep, and realized that this was where the signals converged, the invisible trail the aliens had been leaving for her all along. As she reached the top of the tower, she paused to catch her breath. The wind whipped around her, carrying with it an almost metallic scent that made her skin crawl. Then she heard it, a low hum, rising from the city below, vibrating through the metal beneath her feet. Her pulse quickened. The aliens were here, or at least their influence was. She could feel it in the air, like an electric charge that made every nerve ending in her body scream. Memories of the chamber flashed in her mind. The cold, the strange instruments, the way they had studied her, poked and prodded, as if trying to rewrite the rules of life itself. And yet, she remembered something else, too. A flicker of curiosity in their gaze, almost like they had underestimated her. That small human spark, the one thing they couldn't fully grasp, was still alive inside her. She clenched her fists, feeling the pulsing energy respond, almost as if it were listening, waiting for her to make the first move. The hum grew louder, shifting and warping, and shadows began to flicker along the streets below. She couldn't see them clearly, but she could feel their shapes moving, deliberate and patient. It wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was a test of will. Her mind raced, every option, every possible escape, every potential strategy. But she knew that hesitation could cost her everything. The aliens weren't just observing now, they were challenging her. And she could feel that the time for running had passed. Then, a new sound joined the hum, a sharp, almost mechanical note that cut through the night. She recognized it immediately. It was the signal from the journal, the pattern she had traced, amplified and distorted. Someone, or something, was calling her, drawing her in, and the closer she listened, the more she understood that this was no ordinary trap. It was a confrontation, a reckoning she had been preparing for without even knowing it. Her heart pounded as the shadows below coalesced into shapes she could barely comprehend. They hovered, shifting between forms, impossibly fast, and yet she sensed an intelligence behind them, calculating, anticipating her every move. She took a deep breath, letting the strange energy flow through her, feeling both fear and determination surge together. Every instinct screamed that she was on the edge, that the next few moments would decide everything. The city held its breath. The night seemed to stretch forever. And at that moment, she knew the aliens weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting for her to act, for the first move in a battle she hadn't even realized had already begun. She thought she understood what was coming, that the shadows and the hums were just the aliens testing her will, but she was wrong. As the shapes below shifted and pulsed, the air around her changed. The pulsing energy under her skin surged violently, sending shivers through her entire body. Then, without warning, a voice, clear, unmistakable, and yet not human, spoke inside her head. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from her. "You are not alone," it said, the words reverberating in a way that made her bones ache. She stumbled back, gripping the railing of the tower, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. At first, she thought it was another trick, another test designed to unnerve her. But the voice persisted, calm and deliberate, guiding her attention downward. Through the darkness, she saw it, one of the shadows breaking apart, revealing a figure unlike anything she had encountered. It wasn't fully alien nor fully human, it was both. Her mind raced. Could the aliens be creating hybrids? Was this some kind of experiment on others like her? The implications were staggering. She had thought she was alone, that her struggle was singular, but now she realized there might be others who had been returned, changed, and hidden in plain sight. Her pulse quickened, fear mingling with curiosity. If this figure was alive, it could hold answers, but it could also be a threat, a weapon in the alien's design. Before she could react, the figure moved with impossible speed, landing on the tower platform with a silent grace. Her heart leaped into her throat. It was humanoid in shape, but the skin shimmered with an iridescence that shifted under the moonlight. Eyes glowing faintly met hers, and for the first time she sensed an intelligence that mirrored her own. It was studying her, and yet there was something almost pleading in its gaze. The hum in the city intensified, and she realized it wasn't coming from the shadows alone. It was coming from her. The energy inside her pulsed in sync with the figure's presence, as if they were linked in a way she didn't understand. A part of her screamed to run, but another deeper part recognized the truth. This was a turning point. This second revelation, the existence of others, of hybrids, meant the aliens' experiment was far larger than she had imagined. Humanity itself was a test, and the outcome was far from certain. She took a tentative step forward, and the figure mirrored her movement. A sudden flash of insight hit her. Perhaps she wasn't just a survivor. Maybe she was part of the key to what the aliens were trying to create, or prevent. Her mind whirled with possibilities. Could she control the energy inside her? Could she communicate with this being? And what did the aliens truly want from her and anyone else who had been returned? As the wind howled and the city below shivered under the faint hum, she realized the stakes had just doubled. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting to understand, to protect, and perhaps to lead in a war that had already begun. The figure extended a hand, not threatening, but urgent, and she understood that the next choice she made could determine not only her fate, but the fate of everyone caught in this invisible war. She swallowed hard, feeling the pulsing energy surge again, and knew that whatever came next, nothing would ever be the same. The night held secrets that even she was only beginning to glimpse, and the aliens were watching. The figure's hand hovered just above hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. Every sound, the hum of the city, The whistle of the wind, the faint shifting of the shadows, faded into silence. Then, as if responding to some unseen signal, the energy beneath her skin exploded outward, a wave of light and warmth that knocked her to her knees. The figure grabbed her arm, steadying her, and the connection between them pulsed like a heartbeat. It wasn't just energy, it was understanding, a bridge between human and something far beyond human. She looked into its glowing eyes and finally realized the truth. The aliens hadn't just been experimenting on her. They had been testing humanity itself. They were searching for the spark, the resilience, the unyielding instinct that defined human life. And somehow she had survived in a way no one else had. Now, with the figure beside her, she understood that the hybrid wasn't a weapon to destroy her. It was a guide, a reflection of what she could become if she embraced the power the aliens had left inside her. The shadows below began to converge, forming shapes that were both beautiful and terrifying. The aliens were coming, sensing that their experiment had taken an unexpected turn. Her heart raced, but fear no longer controlled her. She focused on the pulsing energy, letting it flow through her, through the figure beside her, as a shield and a signal. A wave of light shot into the sky, and the shadows recoiled, confused by a force they hadn't anticipated. The hybrid's eyes glowed brighter, and for the first time she felt their shared consciousness, a unity that amplified her strength. She understood their intent. They didn't want to destroy her. They wanted to communicate, to reach through the fear and show her the possibilities. And with that understanding came a realization that stunned her. The aliens' control wasn't absolute. They had underestimated the resilience of life, the unpredictable spark of humanity that couldn't be programmed, probed, or extinguished. Just as she began to feel a cautious hope, the ground beneath the tower shuddered violently. A new form appeared, larger, more imposing than any shadow she had seen before. Its voice rang in her mind, different from the hybrids, cold, commanding, and urgent. "You were not meant to survive," it said, echoing in every corner of her consciousness. The energy pulsing through her flared uncontrollably, and she realized the twist. The aliens hadn't just been testing humans. They had been evolving themselves, using every experiment to adapt. The true danger wasn't just what they had done to her. It was what they were becoming. The hybrid beside her extended a hand again, this time not just to guide but to merge their strength. She reached out, and together they released a pulse so intense it forced the alien presence back, at least for now. The city below lit up as the energy washed over it. A temporary reprieve, a message that humanity had a chance. But as she looked up at the night sky, she realized the final twist. The aliens weren't defeated. They were watching, learning from every move she had made. Survival had been won, but the war was far from over. Her chest heaved, the energy within her slowing but still present. She stood taller now, changed, aware of both the danger and the power she carried. The hybrid stepped back into the shadows, leaving her with a single thought. The fight was only beginning, and the real test had yet to come. The first light of dawn crept over the city, painting the streets in soft gold and washing away the shadows of the night. She stood on the tower's edge, the pulsing energy inside her now calm, like a river that had found its course. The hybrid figure had disappeared into the early morning mist, leaving her with a quiet sense of connection and an unspoken promise. The alien's influence was still out there, but she wasn't powerless anymore. She had learned to control the force within her, to channel it, and to understand that it wasn't a curse, it was a gift. Walking through the empty streets, she noticed small signs of change. The city felt different, alive in ways it hadn't before. People stirred, oblivious to the invisible war that had been fought above them. But somehow, the balance had shifted. The energy the aliens had left behind and the courage she had discovered in herself had left a mark on the world. Every step she took felt purposeful. Every breath a reminder that survival wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about embracing the resilience that defined her humanity. She returned to the library where the journal had first guided her, tracing the lines of ink that had told her stories of others like her. The pages no longer felt like distant warnings. They were instructions, a roadmap for what humanity might need to do if the aliens returned. She realized she wasn't alone in her understanding anymore. Others would come, survivors, or those changed in ways she couldn't yet imagine, and together they could face what was coming. The thought filled her with cautious hope. Her mind wandered to the shadows she had faced, the experiments, and the pulsing energy that had both terrified and empowered her. The aliens hadn't been defeated, but she had learned something far more valuable. Fear could be transformed into strength, uncertainty into strategy. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or weapons. It was adaptability, courage, and the unwillingness to surrender to forces beyond its understanding. She smiled faintly, knowing that the spark that had kept her alive could light the way for others. As the city woke, she paused by a small park, watching the sunlight glint off leaves and buildings. Life was ordinary, mundane even, yet it was precious because it had been threatened and reclaimed. The hybrid's parting words echoed in her mind. The fight was only beginning. She understood now that the story wasn't about a single night, a single battle, or even a single person. It was about the choices people made when faced with the impossible, and the strength that emerged when they refused to give up. For the first time since it had begun, she felt at peace. She was no longer the same person who had been taken, tortured, and returned. She was stronger, wiser, and aware that survival carried responsibility. The aliens might return, and new challenges would surely arise, but she was ready. Humanity, with all its flaws and brilliance, had proven it could endure, adapt, and fight back. With a deep breath, she turned from the park, heading toward the city streets that now seemed full of possibility. The night's terror had passed, but its lessons remained. And as she walked, the world felt bigger, brighter, and full of potential. She had faced the unknown, embraced the change, and survived. Now it was time to live, and to prepare for whatever might come next.